Welcome to our recap of the Day 11 events. We had a huge day here at the Candidates with 3 decisive games in the Open. Let's take a look at the results. So, Hikaru Nakamura won with the black pieces against Prague from a seemingly innocuous symmetrical opening that resulted in an early endgame. Jan Nepomniachtchi took a lot longer to win. His game was one of the last to finish in the tournament, as he defeated Vidit with the black pieces in a very dramatic endgame. And Alireza Firouzja won his game incredibly quickly within the first few hours of play. Gukesh and Fabiano had a fighting draw that I think both players will probably be reasonably satisfied with. So let's take a look at the standings. We have Jan Nepomniachtchi at 7 points out of 11. Now he's half a point ahead of Hikaru and Gukesh. Fabiano a point behind. Prague just losing today is now a point and a half behind. So I do think that it looks like now it is a 4-horse race, Aman.
Yeah, it absolutely does. The standings are heating up there in the open section, and we can also review the results from the women's candidates as well. We saw 3 decisive results. Tan Zhongyi extending her lead in the event with a win against Katerina Lacno with the white pieces. Hampi with a good technique there in the endgame against Selimova. And the fighting spirit from Vaishali to win against Goryachkina, where you and I just didn't expect that to happen.
That result was certainly surprising as she takes down the top seed in the tournament. So now we have Tan Zhongyi back again atop the leaderboard at 7.5 points, followed by Lei at 7. And now look what a big lead has opened up between place number 2 and 3 to 5. I mean, 1.5 points. It's very hard to imagine anyone winning this tournament other than Lei or Tan. So it's going to be a fight between them. And we're going to walk you through the highlight moments of the day. Certainly, this was a very dramatic finish to the game between Vidit and Nepo. So around move 40, when they made the time control, and this was already like past a point where Nepo sort of gambled in a bad position.
Right.
And Vidit was like objectively winning, but didn't find it in his time trouble. So then we get here and White is doing fine. And they start repeating where White opens up an attack on this pawn, Black defends it, White attacks the bishop goes back. And I suppose if White would have wanted to repeat, he could have had the draw in hand. But Vidit was more ambitious. Okay, he goes knight g3, decides to attack the pawn in a different way because the bishop cannot protect it from d6 anymore. There's some tricks with h5, and we get into this phase of the battle, both sides kind of maneuvering. The really interesting part came a little later. We can see that Black is making some progress. It's like a little tricky for White to play. There's this cool exchange sack on the cards.
It definitely seemed that at this point, everybody was shuffling. The balance was being maintained. You see the evaluation bar just never ever wavered the entire game. But it was, I think, Jan's decision to actually sacrifice the majority of his pawns. He was up a pawn, and then this crazy move, knight d5, really opened the game up.
Yeah, I mean, this was surprising for us. Like, we saw all of his pawns disappear, and we were like, how can this be that great? But it was actually a really tricky practical decision by Nepo. And in this moment, White came up with this very interesting intermezzo, bishop g3, or like, you know, without moving his knight, he attacks the rook. And we really thought that after knight c3, Nepo was sort of resigned to a draw.
That's right.
Because it seemed like he'd calculated this line with rook takes c3.
It's very forcing. King takes c3, bishop takes b8, king takes c4, and ultimately, I think in Vidit's own time pressure, he managed to convince himself out of this because you know, in the resulting position, white has some ideas to sacrifice the h pawn, maybe push the g pawn, but at the end of the day, that involves a sacrifice that you're not sure every single exact move all the way to the end. And meanwhile, black has this passed c pawn, and the pawns over there are on dark squares as well. So targets for black's bishop. Understandable that he didn't want to go into this, but Irina, that forced him to make a crazy decision and not take the knight on c3 at all.
Yeah, we were really surprised when he went for the move king a3.
Yeah, king a3.
I mean, it kept the game going, and the computer does not disapprove of this move. But, you know, to basically avoid a forcing line that's taking off all of the dangerous pieces off the board, it was a bit of a shock. And I really think this move king a3 was the culprit of why he lost, because after rook b4, oh yeah, we got it here. After rook b4, this was a very tricky move by Nepo.
Yeah.
So tricky, so poisonous.
Amazing move that plays against Vidit's time trouble, also happens to be the best move in the position, and hitting the knight with the rook, there's still so many other threats maintained, and this is when Vidit went wrong with his next move. But I mean, honestly, what he had to play here is crazy in itself. So he played knight b2.
Yeah, let's show people, like, so we were actually looking at rook b7, which is a bad move by black, because then knight b2, the king and the knight are in trouble because now there's going to be a check from f4. So the point is that Nepo's move, rook b4, is really aimed against the sort of winning threat of knight b2. Because Vidit still played this move. It turned out to be the blunder. He needed to go the other way with the knight. He went this way, and suddenly there's no check at f4.
Yeah, and that's just that terrible moment of realization where the tactic and sequence you've been relying on to keep you in the game, rook b4 prevents exactly that. And from here, Irina, honestly, there was nothing that he could have done. I think Jan converted beautifully, but the king is so active, the bishop on e7 is eyeballing the king on a3, and this was converted beautifully.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that these pieces are surrounding the white king, and there's actually mating attack in the endgame. So not taking those pieces off the board turned out to be very costly. But Jan, this is not the game. This was like our analysis. Yeah, rook f7 happened here, and anyway, it was easy for black to win.
That's the nail in the coffin. Nepo is not going to mess up that opportunity that was presented to him, and such a crucial win at this stage in the tournament.
Yeah, that was just incredible. I'm just like leaning back and thinking about what we saw.
Yeah,
that was so dramatic.
It really was.
To see how the game was progressing, and you could sort of feel, right, that like somehow Vidit was playing with fire. You know, he probably needed to end this game a while ago, but he didn't, and that's why we have a new sole leader in the tournament. But let's take a look at how Hikaru Nakamura outplayed Praggnanandhaa with the black pieces. We thought that his symmetric opening was not going to yield anything more than a draw. In fact, the queens came off so early.
And honestly, the position is symmetrical, but if anyone is a little bit better, it's white. So that's Pragg with that extra move just by having the white pieces. So immediately you feel like Hikaru wasn't aiming for anything too special, happy with a draw. And it turns out his very unique preparation, this move a5 in the opening, was a remarkable shot, allowing knight b5, but that's actually what he wanted Pragg to do.
Yeah, and at some point this pawn gets to a4, and he starts to outplay Pragg. Like, he got his bishop to b3, and already you start feeling like some of the problems, because white cannot really fight for the d file. It just gets a little bit uncomfortable to play.
Exactly.
And after a bunch of maneuvering, where it really just feels a lot easier to play as black, yeah, you can see what happens is Pragg goes rook b1, and he goes rook c1.
Right.
We missed this part in the broadcast, but certainly not inspiring. And then Pragg tries to break out, and then makes a tactical oversight with this move, king e3. It looks quite natural. Like, why not bring your king out in an active way? Actually cost him the game. I think pretty much any move would have been better than that. I'm trying to remember what it could have been. Maybe even, could it be this move? Yeah, like anything was better than king e3 because knight d5 suddenly...
I feel like your king is supposed to be brought out in the endgame, but maybe not this early. The king on e4 is looking a little misplaced, and there's so many ways that black can take advantage of it tactically. B takes c3 had to be played because of what you just outlined, and this really nice move, c5, using the whole board. The rook on b6 can swing to e6 now, and I think what's the toughest to appreciate is just how clumsy that knight on g4 is, and Hikaru exploits it with this move h5 beautifully. The knight has really nowhere to go because e5, it's walking into a pin on e6, and f2, there's still rook e6, and the white king would have to go right into that rook from d8.
So we're basically seeing two endgames today where like the king position is still very significant, and the kings are not safe despite the limited material on the board, right? So like this knight came under a big attack, and it was a desperate situation for Prague, who winds up putting his knight in this horrible square on h6. And I guess this is where he lost that knight. And then Hikaru converted with his extra piece.
Yeah, and he made the conversion look easy. So Hikaru Nakamura wins late into this candidates event when he needs a win to catch up to the leaders. He's not quite there yet after the heroics from Nepo, but he's putting himself in a huge position to contend for first.
And the game in the women's that had a lot of significance was between Tan and Logno. Tan gets another win. They had a very complicated game, and probably the key moments were somewhere around here. Such an unusual position. White played rook c5, which was apparently not a great idea by Tan, but she was trying to use some tactical means to defend this knight, or, you know, she was threatening the pawn, putting pressure here. And black had some ideas of f4 that were quite beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, this can really, if you take with the g pawn, then suddenly your h pawn is loose here as well. And obviously the e pawn capturing just opens up some huge threats on that diagonal, as the king on g1 is feeling very exposed and very tough to deal with. So Tan was kind of overextending in this game a little bit with that rook c5 move, but Irina kind of paid off for her due to the reaction from Logno not being the best.
Yeah, Logno did not seize the moment. She went here, attacking the knight, and then she actually blunders on the next move. f4 was still an option for her.
Right.
But she blunders with bishop takes b3. She tries like some discovery on the rook, which really just doesn't leave her in very good shape. Like, she's still down a pawn. And it was just downhill from here.
Yeah, it's the queen and bishop are both eyeballing the g7 pawn now for checkmate in one. And from here, I think Tan's technique, which has been her strong suit this event, once again is pretty much perfect here as...
Nope. There's a checkmate threat.
Yeah, I mean, g7 threat means that the bishop had to go to f6, and so many exchanges happened. And with that extra material, I think Tan was able to honestly make it look easy from only being up one pawn.
Yeah, so pretty convincing win by Tan. Well, you know, Logno had her moments of opportunity, but she let it slip. So therefore, we have Tan leading the tournament again.
Right.
We got 3 rounds left to go. It's so exciting every day. I mean, we got 3 decisive games in each section today.
I know, it's unbelievable. I feel like this candidates, the open and the women's, has both been so exciting. It's really a treat as a chess fan, especially as a commentator, to have so many exciting games to look forward to every day. And it also means the standings feel like you're never assured of who's leading and who's going to win this tournament until the very final rounds. Yeah,
well, Nepo has put himself in a great position.
Right.
You know, because this win, this gift in a way that was presented to him by FIDE, I think is going to be very important. It's also going to just give him that confidence that he hasn't had in a while. So, you know, he's been the leader from early on, but without having tasted a win for like 6 games.
Yeah, he's just been so solid, making the draws. You know, he's been in this candidates tournament so many times and been successful in it that I feel like he knows something and it's working for him. So all those draws, but then in the clutch, he comes in those final rounds with a win.
But I think Hikaru is not going to make it easy for him.
No, we learned that, I think, both today and in the last round, a couple wins from Hikaru, and he's reminding everyone who counted him out early, maybe after some early an early loss, that he's absolutely a contender for first place, and Nepo's not running away with anything.
Well, the amazing thing about Hikaru is that he's played 4 decisive games in a row. So he's added so much action to this tournament, and that's why we've been really enjoying watching his play. And we're going to be back for round 12 tomorrow, the candidates at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time.